My dear mother hadn't yet reached the age of 18 when she encountered my father, who at the time was 4 years her senior. Love blossomed between them, and as often happens in such circumstances, she conceived a child. They patiently waited until my mother turned 18, and only then did they solemnize their union, well aware that she already carried a 3-month-old life within her. Determined to forge their own path, free from reliance on their parents, they rented a room in a communal apartment. And so it came to be that I was born, before my mother's 19th year dawned. Promptly after completing their education, my father, having graduated from the Polytechnic Institute, assumed the role of a foreman in the mechanical workshop of a factory. Meanwhile, my mother, nestled in the embrace of maternity leave, relinquished her fervent attentions to nurture and raise me, while benefiting from my father's financial contributions. During the restless nights, he would graciously step in, offering my mother respite from my incessant wailing. He washed and ironed diapers, dashed to procure medicine during times of illness, the embodiment of a devoted husband and father. As my mother emerged from her maternity leave, she embarked on a new chapter, enrolling in medical school at the esteemed Faculty of Medicine. Consequently, I was entrusted to the care of my grandmother, my mother's own flesh and blood. However, the demanding nature of her medical studies, taken up in a faraway city, meant my mother's appearances in my life grew increasingly scarce, restricted to sporadic visits during her well-deserved breaks. These reunions were more than mere occasions. They were grand celebrations. I vividly recall the 3 of us parading on outings and taking in the enchantment of the silver screen. With my mother's presence at home, I was granted the privilege of staying up late, glued to the television screen. Alas, vacations were fleeting, and soon she departed once more, leaving behind a void that cast dreary shadows over the days. Throughout it all, my father remained steadfast in his support. He would bring me to his abode on weekends, patiently guiding me in the arts of skiing and ice skating. Additionally, it was he who escorted me to my very first day of school, embarking on that pivotal journey alongside me. I still remember how he and I used to accompany my mother when she visited on her vacation. The train arrived late at night, and we had to trek 3 kilometers to the station. Dad would carry me on his shoulders as we walked along the road under the night sky. It felt so comforting that sometimes I even dozed off on his strong shoulders. My mother completed her studies at the Institute when I was in 2nd grade. She pursued her education for 6 years and returned home to continue her training. The city hospital assigned her to work in our town. Luckily, my dad had already secured a 2-bedroom apartment through his job, allowing us to enjoy a happy family life without any obstacles. I must mention that my mother was an absolute beauty in her younger years. With a slender figure, blonde tresses, and captivating blue eyes, it was no wonder my father was smitten after their first encounter. Over the years, her beauty not only remained intact but flourished, radiating with newfound charm. Even at the age of 40, people mistook my mother for a young maiden when we strolled together. Rather than recognizing us as mother and son, they assumed we were a couple deeply in love. After graduating from school, I enrolled in Aviation Institute and became a pilot at the age of 23. Fate smiled upon me as I was fortunate enough to work for domestic airlines for 6 months after completing my studies. Subsequently, I was dispatched to South Africa as a co-pilot on the Embraer aircraft. This remarkable plane facilitated charter flights across Africa and even ventured to magnificent cities like Paris, London, and Washington. Our crew consisted entirely of Russians, including 3 lovely stewardesses. After a year of service, our first pilot departed for personal reasons, leaving me with the opportunity to assume his esteemed position. During my few visits back home, I was always welcomed at the airport by my father and the exquisitely beautiful young woman who is my mother. And so, my time abroad eventually reached its conclusion. I purchased gifts for my parents, a set of luxurious French cosmetics for my mother, and an impressive collection of rare tin soldiers for my dad. He enjoyed tinkering with these figurines during his leisure hours, meticulously creating battle dioramas in an endeavor to maintain historical accuracy. The aircraft touched down and rolled up to the gate. Unhurriedly, I put on my jacket, letting the passengers in a mad rush to exit go ahead of me. I grabbed my carry-on, thanked the flight attendant, and disembarked. After breezing through passport control and collecting my suitcase, I scanned the throngs of people searching for my folks. They appeared to be running late, but I wasn't bothered and strolled over to the line for taxis. As I stepped out of the terminal and made my way to the parking area, a familiar voice stopped me in my tracks. I glanced over my shoulder and observed my mother alighting from an elegant vehicle, gaily greeting me with a wave. My, oh my, had they struck it rich to own such a luxurious automobile. My mother appeared absolutely ravishing, with her impeccably coiffed hair, creamy coat, delicate silk scarf, and stiletto heels. Surely a lottery win was at play here. "Mom, are you all alone? Where's Dad? Is he unwell?" I inquired, somewhat perplexed by the situation. "Get in the car, Yura. So much has occurred. We'll converse as we journey," my mother replied, her tone brimming with intrigue. Taking my place in the rear seat, adjacent to my mother, I noticed the driver and a young man occupying the front seats. As soon as I shut the door, the young man pivoted towards my mother and curiously inquired, "Alina Sergeyevna, where shall we be heading?" "Home, Misha," my mother retorted, her response dripping with an air of hostility. She then cast a glance in my direction and beamed with a concealed smile. "Ira, it's been half a year since I bid farewell to Vitaly. Currently, I am residing with the man who holds the key to my heart. I refrained from sharing this information with you earlier, as I didn't want to burden your mind while you were engrossed in work. Allow me to introduce my current spouse, Sergey, the one and only love of my life. Destined to be apart, fate intertwined our paths once again 2 years ago, and since then, there has been no separation." Observing her, it was evident that her thoughts were consumed by worry. Her face displayed a flush, and her eyes gleamed with excitement. Initially, I was slow to comprehend that she had referred to my father, Vitaly. However, that wasn't the entirety of it. My mother disclosed to me that Vitaly was not my biological father. Astonishingly, my actual father is her current husband, Sergey. Due to external pressures from my parents, he was compelled to separate from her during her pregnancy. Consequently, my mother had no choice but to wed Vitaly, ensuring that I, as their child, had a father figure. Nevertheless, throughout these years, she harbored deep affection for Sergey. While my mother continued speaking, her words became indistinct to me. My heart pounded ferociously in my throat, and a ringing sensation echoed in my ears. I inquired about my father's whereabouts, Vitaly specifically. My mother nervously shrugged and guessed he might be back at home, in our previous apartment. He's playing with toy soldiers, completely lost his marbles. The disdain in her voice was impossible to miss. "So where are we heading now?" I questioned. "Home, sweetheart. We've settled in a suburban village. Our place is a 3-story house," she explained. "Seryoja, Sergey Mitrievich, your biological father, he's a bigwig in the business world. We set up a room just for you on the 2nd floor. In no time, you'll see for yourself." Mom grinned and planted a swift kiss on my cheek, leaving a trace of her lipstick behind. We finally arrived at a grandiose, three-story mansion enveloped by verdant trees and manicured lawns. Greeting us at the entrance was a gentleman of distinguished maturity, exuding an air of commanding presence. It dawned on me that this was Seriosha, my long-lost father. My mother, full of excitement, leaped out of the car and planted a passionate kiss upon his lips. "Seriosha, meet Yura, your son," she exclaimed, embracing Sergei and nudging him towards me. With a warm smile, Sergei approached, extending his hand towards me. "Well, hello, son," he boomed, as I clasped his clammy, lackluster palm. "Step inside. This is your abode," he invited, beaming and gesturing towards the entrance. I turned to my mother, grateful for her presence. I still have some errands to run, one of which is dropping by the airline office to inform them of my arrival. I retrieved a box of beauty products from my bag. "Here you go, Mom." "Oh, thank you." She gracefully shook her luscious locks. "That's sweet of you, my dear." I glanced at my mother, well aware that she didn't actually need these cosmetics. If necessary, her beloved Seriosa would shower her with an entire store's worth of perfumes. Nevertheless, I felt compelled to abide by the rules of proper etiquette. "Stay for breakfast, and then you can be on your way." My mom guided me with her arm. "Freshen up and rest after your journey. Let's postpone that and take care of business first." I insisted. "Lena, a man should attend to his business first." Sergei chimed in with a smile. "Let him go. We'll wait for him." "Take my car. The driver will transport you, and wait as long as needed." "I'd rather just hail a cab." "Don't worry." I planted a kiss on my mother's cheek and headed towards the gate, dialing the number for a taxi. It wasn't until I slid into the taxi that the gravity of the situation truly began to hit me. My mom had been with my dad for almost 27 years. No fights, no dramas, everything generally smooth sailing. I always thought they truly loved each other. But then Sergei showed up, and suddenly my mom didn't think twice about leaving my dad to chase after her happiness with him. And now she's dragging me along for the ride. The old husband, the one who helped raise another man's kid, he's left in the dust. She's made her call, and now I'm expected to eagerly jump into the arms of this new daddy. A father is not the one who fathered you, but the one who raised you. I've heard that cliche so many times. But turns out, life throws you curveballs that don't fit the script. I couldn't help but picture my dad's heartache as his beloved wife walked out to be with another man. And on top of that, she dropped the bombshell that I wasn't his biological son. I was heading to my dad's old flat. Honestly, it didn't matter to me whether he deserved that title or not. To me, he'd always be my dad, the one I cherished. I used my own key to open the door. Silence greeted me. I walked into the room and tossed my bag onto the couch. It felt like a moment frozen in time. Nothing had changed. Everything was exactly where it had always been, as if my childhood had never ended. I began to glance around the rooms, searching for any sign of my father. There was no trace of him, though. Maybe he was just running an errand or stuck at work. Suddenly, I heard the front door creak open. Spinning around, I saw my neighbor standing in the doorway. "Welcome back, Yurachka," she exclaimed. "Your dad's in the hospital. He had a heart attack. The ambulance took him the day before yesterday." The hospital was just a couple of blocks from where we lived, so I decided to hoof it over there. Dad was in the general ward, sharing space with 7 other patients. On my way, I picked up some fruit, a bottle of kefir, and a few juice cartons. "Hey there, Dad." I called out in the most upbeat tone I could muster. What's the big idea, hanging out in hospitals instead of greeting your son? Dad turned, and I saw his eyes widen in surprise. "Hi, Yura. Welcome back home. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to meet you. As you can see, I've kind of fallen apart. Don't sweat it, Dad. I can bounce back, no problem. I'm in this for the long run. From now on, my gig's with domestic airlines, so we'll get by just fine. I brought some goodies for you. You'll see when we get home. By the way, any idea when they're letting you out? Not sure, Yura. They haven't mentioned anything precise yet. Seems like I'll be stuck here for a couple more weeks. My father gave a pained grin and coughed. I couldn't help but notice he used my name instead of calling me son like he usually did. Yep, Mom's handiwork for sure. Get better soon, Dad. Once you're discharged, let's go house hunting for that cottage in the country you always wanted. My father fell silent and turned his gaze away. I lingered with my father for a bit longer, chatting about anything that would take his mind off things. Eventually, I said my goodbyes and went in search of my doctor. He assured me that my father's condition was due to nervous tension, and that with the proper treatment, he would be just fine. Leaving the hospital, an idea hit me. I recalled that my classmate, Igor, was employed at the medical examiner's office. I quickly punched in his number and set up a meeting. When my mom called, I hit the decline button. A family gathering wasn't in the cards at the moment. Igor, I began once we met. I want to do a paternity test. I paused for dramatic effect. But here's the twist. I already know the outcome. Giving him a quick rundown of the situation, I continued. What I need is an official document or a statement confirming that this man is indeed my biological father. Yura, this is blatant counterfeiting, Igor said, his voice tinged with anxiety as he fiddled with a matchbox. Relax, it's just my dad who'll look at it. Give me a hand, will you? With that, Igor rose from his chair. All right, here's the scoop. Fetch me the biomaterial. Your dad's hair would be perfect. Swing by the lab, and the ladies there will collect some samples from you. Be here by 4:00 p.m. sharp. I'll have results ready by tomorrow evening. Because we go way back, I'll fast-track it for you. Igor stared at me. I'll hand you 2 reports, one legit, one bogus. You get to choose what to do with them. Sure thing, here's the revised text. When I walked out of the office, I gave my mom a ring. After listening to her sobbing for what felt like ages, I finally told her I'd crash at our old place tonight and touch base tomorrow. My day was far from over. There was still heaps to tackle. Bright and early the next day, I showed up at my classmate's crib as scheduled. Igor's desk was almost barren, save for a single sheet of paper, proudly flaunting a hefty stamped seal at the bottom. I stared at him anxiously, perplexed by the situation. Wait, so something went wrong? I asked. Igor, however, reassured me with a smile. No, everything went perfectly. He exclaimed as he handed me the report. My heart raced as I read the words written on the paper. According to this report, I whispered incredulously, Vitaly Ivanovich Kozlov is almost certainly Yuri Vitalievich Kozlov's biological father. In that moment, my legs gave way beneath me. Overwhelmed with emotion, I could only manage to blurt out, "What does this even mean?" Which means your old man is your pops in every way possible. So draw your own conclusion and get the hell out of here. Igor chuckled. Half an hour later, I found myself at the hospital where my father was admitted. Hey Dad, how are you holding up? How's it going? I adjusted the fallen blanket on his bed. Thanks, Yura. I'm doing better. They said I can start getting up tomorrow. My father replied, his gaze averted. Dad, why Yura and not my son? Has something changed between us? Or did you love me any less? I inquired, a hint of a smile on my face. Did your mama fill you in on anything? He responded, Oh, she did all right. I know all about her new hubby and nothing about her own son. I retorted with a smirk. "Can you still read without your glasses? Here, let me show you." I handed him the report. He read for quite a while, his hands visibly trembling. Then he locked eyes with me. A single tear trickled down his cheek. "So, are we gonna go buy that countryside retreat, or what?" I exclaimed, a wide smile spreading across my face. I resided with my father, abstaining from disclosing details or casting blame upon my mother. I perceived no purpose in doing so. Initially, she endeavored to persuade me to reside with her and her newfound spouse. However, as time elapsed, she grew more tranquil. I withheld any information regarding the DNA examination, allowing her to persist under the belief that my father was indeed Sergei Mitrovic. Tempus fugit, and eventually I entered into marital bliss with a remarkable young lady, who by happenstance also served as a flight attendant in my crew. A year later, we were blessed with a son, whom we named Vitaly as an homage to his grandfather. Throughout this time, my interactions with my mother were minimal, and I explicitly forbade her from setting foot in our abode. My father, on the other hand, never ventured into matrimony for a second time, despite my occasional introductions to various women. And then destiny dealt its hand, and my father passed away. He was laid to rest beside his progenitors, as was per his request. After a year, my mother's husband, Sergei Mitrovic, also took his final bow. My mother persevered, residing in the same cottage, relinquishing employment while delegating the management of her late husband's company to another. One afternoon, I finally caved to my wife's persistent nudging and decided it was high time to take the family to see my mother. When we got there, she greeted us, a graceful, well-kept lady. She kissed me and my wife warmly, but then stopped dead in her tracks. Her face turned ghostly pale. She had laid eyes on Vitalik, our son. It was like she was looking at a younger version of her first husband, back when she was just a young woman on the brink of matrimony. It all clicked for her in an instant. "Good heavens, what have I done?" She whispered, barely audible, "What have I done?"